The first time the pilot said her name, the cockpit went quiet, not because he trusted her, but because he was scared of what it meant. It started as a normal afternoon flight, packed seats, lukewarm coffee, people half asleep and half annoyed, until a violent shudder ripped through the cabin like the sky itself had snapped. Over the intercom, the captain tried to sound calm, but the microphone caught something else, breathing that was too fast and a pause that was too long. Then the radio came alive, sharp and controlled, a voice from air traffic control asking for identification, and another voice cutting in, military, urgent. 2 F-22s were inbound, fast, low, and locked onto the airliner like they were escorting a president. And then the words that made the flight attendants freeze mid-step, requesting clearance under the authority of one person. Not the captain, not the airline, not the government. A passenger. A woman sitting alone halfway down the cabin, unknown to everyone around her, until that moment. Because somehow, on a day she was supposed to be just another face in row 14, the most advanced fighter jets in the world were asking permission to move under her name. Comment where you're watching from, because you are not ready for what forced her to stand up and what she did next. It was supposed to be the easiest kind of day, a short hop from Cedar Ridge to Harbor City, the kind of flight people forget the moment the wheels touch down. The cabin smelled like recycled air and cheap vanilla hand lotion, and the loudest drama was a kid arguing with his dad about whether clouds were made of water or smoke. A flight attendant named Marisol rolled the cart down the aisle like she'd done it 1,000 times, smiling on autopilot, asking the same question to the same tired faces, coffee or soda. A man in a wrinkled suit kept refreshing his email like the plane was personally responsible for his deadlines. 2 college friends leaned in close over one pair of earbuds, laughing at a video they refused to share with anyone else. Near the window, an older couple held hands without talking, the kind of quiet that means they've stopped needing words. And in seat 14C sat a woman traveling alone, hair tied back, simple jacket, no fancy bag, no attention-seeking. Her boarding pass said Mina Hale, nothing special about that, just another name printed in ink that smudges if you touch it with damp fingers. She didn't ask for extra napkins, she didn't complain about the seat, she didn't even glance around like she was sizing people up. She just watched the little safety card in the seat pocket like it mattered, not dramatically, not suspiciously, just like someone who respects instructions because they've seen what happens when people don't. When the captain's voice came on for the routine greeting, most passengers barely listened, but Mina did, not with fear, with focus, like she was filing away every detail. Outside the window, the sky was clean and bright, the kind of blue that convinces you nothing bad is allowed to happen up there. People settled into their tiny distractions, snacks, music, texting, pretending the world was stable because the seatbelt sign was off. If you judged Mina Hale by what you could see, you would have missed her completely. No ring on her hand, no designer suitcase, no loud laugh, no nervous tapping, just a calm face and a posture that never slouched. But Mina was not built for ordinary travel. She was borrowing it. Years earlier, she had a different kind of seat. One that didn't recline, one strapped tight with harnesses, surrounded by switches, warning lights, and the kind of silence that only exists right before something goes wrong. She learned to fly young, not as a hobby, but like a person learning to swim because the water is coming either way. By the time most people were still figuring out what they wanted in life, Mina was already training other pilots, the kind who would later call her for advice and never say her name out loud in public. The public version of her story was simple: former Air Force, retired early, moved on. The real version was locked behind doors and wiped clean from searchable records. Missions that didn't happen, locations that didn't exist, and debrief rooms where people spoke in short sentences because the truth was too heavy to decorate. She had a call sign once, not a cute nickname. Something earned the hard way, something that spread through squadrons like a warning and a blessing at the same time. Because Mina had a reputation for doing the one thing most people can't do when everything breaks, staying calm enough to think. She wasn't fearless, she just refused to waste time on panic. And that is why, when the aircraft later started shaking in a way that didn't match turbulence, her eyes didn't widen like everyone else's. They narrowed, like she was listening to a language she already understood. Because to Mina, that first ugly shudder wasn't just a scary moment. It was a pattern, and patterns have endings, and she could feel this one racing toward them. The first jolt hit like the plane had slammed into something solid, and for half a second the cabin couldn't decide if it was turbulence or the end. Overhead bins rattled, cups jumped in their trays, and a few people laughed the nervous kind of laugh that sounds brave until it breaks. Then came the sound, a deep tearing roar from the left side, like metal being chewed, followed by a hard vibration that traveled up the floor and into everyone's bones. Marisol grabbed the drink cart before it rolled, her smile gone now, eyes scanning faces the way a lifeguard scans water. The captain's voice came on quick, too quick, telling everyone to remain seated, saying there was a minor issue, and they were handling it. But the cabin smelled different, sharp and hot, like burned plastic, and the air felt thinner even before the masks dropped. People started whispering in fragments. What was that? Did you feel that? Is this normal? The man in the wrinkled suit stopped refreshing his email and started refreshing the flight map, like watching a screen could hold the plane together. A baby began to cry, then another, then an adult tried to shush them with a voice that shook more than the plane did. Mina didn't look around for comfort. She looked toward the window, then toward the ceiling, then down at the floor near the wing line, collecting clues like she was already building the story of what had failed. Her fingers tightened around the armrest, not in fear, in calculation, because she knew what certain vibrations meant. She knew what certain smells meant. She knew how fast minor issue can turn into we're out of options. A loud pop snapped through the cabin, and the lights flickered for a heartbeat. Then the oxygen masks dropped in a sudden white wave, bouncing on their cords like ghosts coming down to meet them. The calm in the cabin shattered. People fumbled for masks with clumsy hands. Parents tugged them onto children. Strangers helped strangers. And somewhere near the back someone yelled a prayer like it was a command. Marisol tried to speak, tried to coach them through it, but her voice was fighting a rising panic that was now louder than the engines. And through all of it, Mina kept her mask close but didn't rush, eyes steady, listening to the plane like a doctor listening to a patient's heartbeat. Because she could feel the problem stacking, one failure pulling another behind it, like dominoes falling in the dark, and she knew the next piece was coming fast. The captain came back on the intercom again, and this time he didn't try to dress it up. His voice was still controlled, but the control sounded borrowed, like a man gripping the edge of a table so nobody sees his hands shaking. He told everyone they were dealing with an engine issue and a systems warning, that they were turning toward the nearest suitable airport, and that the crew had been trained for situations like this. But Mina heard the missing words, because pilots only repeat training lines when the checklist isn't keeping up anymore. The plane pitched slightly, not a gentle dip, more like it suddenly remembered gravity existed. You could feel it in the stomach before the brain caught up, that slow sinking sensation that makes people look at each other with the same unspoken question, are we still flying, or are we falling? A few rows ahead, a woman started sobbing into her mask, the sound muffled and desperate. The wrinkled suit guy grabbed his armrest so hard his knuckles went pale. Then he whispered, I have kids, like the plane could hear him and negotiate. Marisol moved fast now, not selling snacks, not smiling, just checking masks, checking seatbelts, checking faces for the kind of panic that turns into chaos. Then the cabin lights dimmed again, and this time they didn't bounce back right away. The hum of the aircraft changed, that steady background noise people stopped noticing. It thinned out, then stuttered, like a song skipping on a scratched record. Mina turned her head toward the wing, and for the first time her calm hardened into something sharper. Because she could tell the difference between one engine limping and an aircraft running out of breath entirely. A new sound took over, wind, louder than before, rushing past the fuselage like the sky was scraping its nails along the plane. That's when the captain said it, not to the whole cabin this time, but over the cabin speaker by accident, a hot mic moment, a voice meant for the cockpit only. We're losing thrust, we're losing it. Silence hit the passengers like a second impact, because even the people who didn't understand planes understood that one sentence. The older couple who had been holding hands squeezed tighter, like they could anchor each other to life. The college friends stopped being friends for a second and became kids, wide-eyed, swallowing fear. Marisol's face went pale, and she looked toward the cockpit door like it was the only thing between them and the truth. Mina finally put her oxygen mask on properly, adjusted it like she'd done it in harsher places than a passenger cabin. Then she leaned forward and listened. Not for comfort, for information. The plane wobbled again, and people screamed, not because it was worse than before, but because their bodies were finally accepting what their minds were trying to deny. Mina stood up, and the movement alone made heads turn, because standing during an emergency is the one thing everyone knows you're not supposed to do. Marisol stepped into her path immediately, voice tight. "Ma'am, you need to sit down right now." Mina didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't waste time. She said, "I need to speak to the captain," and she said it with the calm certainty of someone who wasn't asking for permission. Marisol looked at her like she was insane, like she was dangerous, like she was about to cause a problem on top of the problem. And Mina held her gaze and added one more line, quiet enough that only Marisol could hear it. "If I don't get into that cockpit in the next 2 minutes, nobody on this plane is going to have anywhere to sit, because we won't be landing at an airport. We'll be dropping wherever the world decides to catch us." Marisol blocked the aisle like a door with a heartbeat, one hand braced on the seat back, the other hovering near her radio, her eyes saying, "Do not make me do this the hard way." Around them, the cabin was breaking into two kinds of people, the ones frozen in place, and the ones trying to bargain with reality, and nobody had room for a stranger walking toward the cockpit like she owned the sky. Mina didn't push past her, didn't touch her, didn't even look annoyed. She leaned in just enough to be heard over the wind howl, and spoke like she was reading a weather report. "Tell the captain to open the door. Say, Raven 9 is in the cabin." Marisol blinked, like she didn't understand the words. Then her face shifted, because even if you don't know what it means, you can hear when a sentence carries weight. "I can't do that," she whispered. "The rules, the lock, the—" Mina cut in softly, not cruel, not loud, just final. "This is already past rules. You can either carry a message or carry regret." Another shudder hit, harder than the others, and the ceiling panels rattled like the plane was trying to shake itself apart. Somewhere behind them someone screamed, and someone else shouted for them to sit down, and for a moment Marisol looked like she might refuse anyway, because fear loves rules when it has nothing else. Then Mina added one more detail, a small one, like she was offering Marisol a handhold in a storm. "Tell him I flew the night range incident. Tell him I'm the reason that simulator module exists." Marisol's eyes widened, and that was the moment she stopped seeing Mina as a passenger and started seeing her as a threat to the universe's plan in the best way. She grabbed her interphone, thumb trembling, and called the cockpit with a voice that tried to sound professional but came out thin. "Captain, there's a woman here. She says to tell you, Raven 9 is in the cabin." A pause. Not the kind of pause where someone is busy, the kind where someone's entire world has just shifted its shape. Then the captain's voice came back, rough and immediate, like he'd been punched in the chest. "Say that again." Marisol swallowed, repeated it, and Mina could hear the change on the other end, the scramble, the sudden sharp focus, like a light snapping on in a dark room. The cockpit door stayed closed for a heartbeat longer, the longest heartbeat of Marisol's life. Then the lock clicked, loud in the chaos. The door cracked open, and a blast of alarm noise and hot, stressed air spilled into the aisle. Inside, the cockpit looked like a war zone made of blinking lights, warning tones overlapping, pilots strapped in with shoulders tight and eyes red. The captain, a man named Callum Brent, turned and stared at Mina like he'd seen a ghost walk onto his flight deck. "You're not supposed to exist," he said, half to her, half to himself. Mina stepped forward, steady on the shaking floor, and met his stare without drama. "I'm here, and you're running out of time," she said, then nodded toward the right seat. "Unlock the door fully, let me in, and keep flying the attitude. Do not chase altitude." Callum hesitated for a fraction of a second, the kind that can kill you in the air. Then he made a decision that felt insane and inevitable at the same time. He pulled the door open, waved her in, and the moment Mina crossed that threshold, the plane stopped feeling like a passenger flight and started feeling like an operation. She didn't sit down like a guest. She leaned over the center console, read the warnings in one sweep, and spoke with calm authority. "All right," she said, "we're not solving this. We're surviving it, and we're doing it clean." Mina's eyes moved across the cockpit like she was reading a map she'd memorized years ago. Warning lights stacked on top of warning lights, alarms arguing with each other, The kind of chaos that makes good pilots start guessing. She didn't guess, she pointed. Callum, keep the nose stable, don't chase the altitude, just hold the attitude. First officer, give me airspeed and descent rate every 10 seconds. No opinions, just numbers. The first officer nodded so hard it looked painful, fingers flying over switches that suddenly felt useless. The aircraft shuddered again, and the yoke in Callum's hands went loose for a split second, like the plane was letting go of itself. Marisol, still in the doorway, gasped, and Mina snapped her head toward her without even turning her body. Stay right there. If you leave this door, we lose our only calm place. Then Mina keyed the radio, and her voice changed, not louder, just sharper, like a blade sliding out of a sheath. Harbor Control, this is Flight 702. We are declaring full emergency. We have cascading failures and limited control authority. We need military air support and ground corridor clearance now. The controller replied fast, but you could hear disbelief trying to slow their words. Confirm the nature of the emergency. Confirm who is speaking. Mina didn't argue. She gave them what they needed, clean and simple. This is Mina Hale, former Tactical Aviation Command. Authentication phrase is Green Lantern. I am assuming operational coordination to save this aircraft. There was a pause. Then the controller's tone flipped from customer service to crisis mode. Understood, standby. Mina didn't stand by. She kept moving. She switched frequencies, hit the guard channel, and spoke into the air like she was calling a favor from the sky itself. This is Raven 9 requesting escort. I need 2 fighters on my wing for navigation and stability reference. Scramble immediately. Callum's eyes flicked toward her, half disbelief, half relief, like a drowning man watching someone walk onto the dock with a rope. Raven 9, Callum said under his breath, like he couldn't believe he was saying it out loud. Mina didn't look at him. She was already working the next problem. If we try for an airport, we won't make it, she said. We need a straight path, long, flat, no obstacles. The first officer stammered. What does that mean? Mina answered like it was the most normal thing in the world. It means we need a highway. Another jolt, another dip, the wind scream rising as the plane lost more margin. The controller came back, voice tight. Military is responding. We are coordinating a ground corridor. Give us your best glide profile and heading. Mina rattled off numbers and headings in plain language, then added the part that made everyone in that cockpit swallow hard. You need to clear traffic completely, both directions. I mean empty, no cars, no people on overpasses, and I need emergency vehicles staged, but off the landing path. Callum's hands tightened on the yoke. He wasn't scared of landing. He was scared of missing, because there is no go around when the engines are gone. A new voice cut through, crisp and confident, military. Raven 9, this is Viper Flight. 2F-22's airborne, 2 minutes out. Mina's jaw set, and for the first time Callum saw something like emotion cross her face. Not fear, not panic, just responsibility landing on her shoulders like extra weight. Viper Flight, copy, you're going to be my eyes and my metronome. I need you tight but safe, no showboating. We are guiding a brick through a keyhole. The lead fighter replied instantly, understood, Raven 9, we are with you. Outside the cockpit windows, 2 dark shapes appeared in the distance, closing fast, clean, controlled, like sharks arriving when the water turns red. In the cabin behind them, passengers were still praying and crying and gripping armrests, unaware that the sky had just sent help, and that the person coordinating it wasn't the captain. Mina pointed again, calm and brutal in her clarity. Callum, you fly the inputs, I will fly the plan. First officer, you feed me numbers. Marisol, you relay comm to the cabin and keep this door sealed. Nobody argued, because the plane was falling and Mina was the only person in the cockpit who sounded like she'd already survived this kind of day. And as the fighters slid into position on both wings, perfectly matched, Mina leaned into the radio one more time and said, Ground control, I need that highway lane cleared now, because we're coming in whether you're ready or not. The fighters tucked in close, one on each side, so steady it looked unreal, like the air itself had decided to behave out of respect. Mina watched them through the cockpit glass, then keyed the radio, voice flat and focused. Viper lead, you're my reference now, call my drift, call my sink. If I start sliding, you correct me before I feel it. Viper lead answered instantly, Raven 9, we have you. Air traffic control cut back in, fast and strained. Raven 9, confirm you are requesting corridor clearance under your authority. Callum glanced at Mina like the whole world had just turned upside down, because that question was not for him. Mina didn't hesitate. Affirmative, clear the corridor under my name, and keep every vehicle off the landing path. For a beat, nobody spoke. Then the controller replied, voice suddenly formal. Raven 9, clearance granted, corridor is yours. That was the moment it became real. Not just a plane in trouble, but a civilian airliner being guided like a combat operation, with two F-22s taking direction from a woman who technically wasn't even part of the flight crew. The first officer called numbers, airspeed dropping, sync rate increasing, we're heavy, we're bleeding fast. Mina pointed at the horizon, not at a runway, at a thin gray line cutting through fields and low buildings, the highway. There, she said, that's our runway. Viper 2 chimed in. Highway is clear ahead. Police units visible. Overpasses are being blocked. No traffic in either direction. Callum's mouth went dry, because a highway is not built for this. No centerline lights. No runway markings. No margin. Just asphalt and fences and the kind of mistakes that turn into headlines. Mina heard the fear in the cockpit without anyone saying it, and she answered it with plain truth. We don't get a second try, she said, so we do it once, clean. The plane shuddered again, a long, ugly shake that made the windshield buzz. Viper lead called out, you're drifting right, correct 2 degrees left, hold it, hold it. Callum adjusted, hands locked in. The first officer kept feeding Mina the numbers like a metronome, speed, descent, distance. Mina ran the plan out loud, not to sound brave, to keep everyone synchronized. We stay centered, we do not chase the ground. We let it come to us. We keep the wings level. We accept the sink. We save the flare for the last heartbeat. Air traffic control came back. Raven 9, you are cleared to land on Corridor Bravo. Winds light. Emergency services staged. Confirm souls on board. Mina answered without missing a beat. 173, and you tell every unit to hold position until we are down. No hero runs. No flashing vehicles on the lane. Viper lead's voice sharpened. You are low. You are low. Add nose slightly. Do not overpull. Callum adjusted again. The aircraft responding slow, like a tired animal that still wanted to live but needed careful hands. The highway rushed closer now, details snapping into focus, lane markings, guardrails, a line of police cars turned sideways far ahead, a cluster of fire trucks parked off the shoulder like an audience holding its breath. In the cabin, passengers didn't know the numbers. They only knew the sound of wind screaming louder than engines, and the way the floor felt like it was tilting toward the earth. Mina could almost picture them, fingers white on armrests, parents covering kids, strangers whispering prayers, and she forced her voice to stay steady, because panic would spread faster than any fire. Viper 2 called. Bridge ahead is clear, no pedestrians, no vehicles. You have about 4,000 feet usable. Callum swallowed hard. 4,000 feet. For a plane that normally wanted a runway made for giants. Mina's eyes stayed on the highway like it was a target, and her tone turned colder, not mean, surgical. We touch down within the first third, or we don't touch down at all, she said. If we float, we die? Viper lead replied. Copy. You are stable. You are centered. Keep it. Keep it. The asphalt filled the windshield now. No runway lights. No comforting signs. Just a strip of human infrastructure about to meet the weight of a falling machine. Mina leaned closer to the glare shield, every sense tuned tight. Now, she said, everyone stay with me. No extra movements. No sudden inputs. We ride it in. And as the plane crossed the start of the cleared corridor, with the fighters pacing it like guardians, the world narrowed to one brutal fact. This landing was happening, and there was no going around. The moment the wheels met the highway, it didn't feel like a landing. It felt like the plane getting punched by the earth. A hard slam, a violent bounce, a second of weightlessness that made everyone's stomachs float up into their throats. Callum fought the yoke with both hands, trying to keep the wings level while the aircraft tried to skid like a shopping cart with a busted wheel. Viper lead's voice cut in, sharp and immediate. You're down. Hold center. Hold center. Mina didn't shout. She didn't cheer. She didn't breathe relief yet. Because touchdown is not survival. Stopping is survival. Spoilers, Mina snapped, then added, gently but deadly serious, do it now. The first officer flipped the controls, and the aircraft shuddered as drag panels bit the air. The cabin behind them erupted in screams, not joy, pure terror, because now they could feel the speed, feel the vibration, feel how little road they had left. Mina glanced at the highway ahead, and her stomach tightened for the first time, because the police cars at the far end weren't far enough, and the curve beyond them was closer than it should have been. Brakes, she said, but steady, no locking. If we skid, we roll. Callum eased into it, the plane groaning like something alive and furious, tires smoking as rubber fought physics. Outside, emergency lights flashed in the distance, but the lane in front of them stayed clear, perfectly empty, like the whole world had stepped aside. The first officer called out, speed bleeding, we're dropping, we're dropping. Mina's eyes tracked the remaining distance with ruthless honesty, calculating not hope, probability. Still fast, she said, stay straight, do not overcorrect. Another bounce hit, smaller, then a sudden lurch as the plane tugged right toward the shoulder. Viper 2 barked, you're drifting, correct left, slight, slight. Callum corrected, hands trembling, sweat on his forehead, teeth clenched like he was holding back a scream. The tires screamed, smoke thickened, and for one terrifying second the nose dipped, as if it wanted to kiss the asphalt. Hold it, Mina said, almost calm, hold it. They blew past an overpass support column close enough that Callum flinched, and Mina didn't, because flinching doesn't change distance. The end of the usable corridor was now racing toward them, a barricade of parked cruisers and empty space beyond. The first officer's voice cracked, we're not stopping. Mina leaned forward, and her tone turned into pure command. We are stopping. Callum pressed harder, controlled, refusing the skid, the plane shuddering like it might tear its own wheels off. For a moment it felt like nothing was happening, like the ground was winning. Then the speed finally collapsed, fast to slower, slower to manageable, manageable to crawling. The aircraft rolled forward on dying momentum, nose dipping, smoke pouring behind them, and stopped with the barricade still in front of the windshield, too close, but not touching. Silence slammed into the cockpit so hard it was almost louder than the alarms had been. Callum stared ahead like he didn't trust the plane to stay still. The first officer let out a sound that wasn't a laugh or a sob, something in between, something human breaking open. Mina keyed the radio with a steady hand, like she was finishing a routine checklist instead of cheating death. Harbor Control, Raven 9, aircraft is down, Corridor Bravo, no fire observed. Viper Lead answered immediately, and for the first time there was emotion in his voice, all mixed with disbelief. Raven 9, confirm you're stopped, confirm you're safe. Mina looked at Callum, then out at the empty highway, then at the thin line of smoke curling past the wing, and finally allowed herself a single breath. Confirmed, she said, we're stopped. And somewhere behind that cockpit door, 173 people began to realize that they were still alive. For a few seconds after the plane stopped, nobody moved. Not because they were calm, because their bodies didn't trust reality yet. The cabin was filled with that strange silence that only comes after terror, when the screaming ends and your ears keep ringing anyway. Then one sound broke through, a single shaky laugh from somewhere near the middle, and it spread like permission, turning into sobs, prayers, and people whispering thank you to nobody in particular. Marisol stood frozen by the cockpit door, one hand still gripping the frame like she was afraid the sky might pull them back up, her eyes wet, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing without words. Inside the cockpit, Callum finally released his grip on the yoke, and his hands didn't drop, they hovered, like he'd forgotten how to be a person who wasn't flying for his life. He turned toward Mina slowly, like he was afraid she would disappear if he blinked. He started, then stopped, because what do you even say to someone who just dragged a falling airplane onto a highway? Mina didn't look triumphant. She looked tired, not physically, emotionally, like she'd just carried something heavy and invisible for everyone else. She unclipped her harness strap, then paused and listened again, not to alarms, to the aircraft itself, waiting for the sound of fire that never came. Outside, emergency crews held position exactly like she'd ordered, no rushing in, no flashing trucks storming the lane, just disciplined stillness while the risk settled. Viper Lead's voice came one more time over the radio. Softer now. Raven 9, we're staying on station until you're clear. Mina answered with a quiet steadiness. Appreciated. Viper, you can peel off when ground says it's safe. Then she stood, opened the cockpit door, and stepped into the aisle. That's when the cabin finally saw her, not as a passenger, but as the reason they still had lungs full of air. People stared like she was a myth walking between rows. A man who'd been praying earlier grabbed the seat back in front of him just to hold himself upright, then whispered, "Was that you?" Mina didn't make a speech. She didn't raise her arms. She didn't soak it in. She just nodded once, like survival was a job that needed finishing, and said, "Stay seated until the crew tells you. We're not done yet." The wrinkled suit guy, the one who'd been refreshing his email like it mattered, looked at her with the kind of shame that hits when you realize you spent your last minutes worrying about nothing. The older couple still held hands, but now they were shaking, pressing their foreheads together like they'd been handed time back and didn't know what to do with it. Marisol finally found her voice and said, "Who are you really?" Mina met her eyes and gave the simplest answer, because the truth didn't need decoration. Someone who didn't want you to die. Later, when the doors opened and the cold air rushed in, people filed out slowly, blinking into daylight like they'd been reborn on asphalt. Some of them tried to thank Mina, some cried, some couldn't speak at all. But Mina didn't stay for the attention. She stepped aside, watched the last passenger exit, and only then let herself exhale fully, like she'd been holding that breath since the first shutter in the sky. Because the strange part wasn't that the fighters asked for clearance under her name. The strange part was that she never asked for the spotlight. She just did what needed doing. And if you've ever underestimated someone because they were quiet, because they looked ordinary, because they weren't trying to impress you, remember this. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who is calm. And sometimes the person who saves everyone is the one nobody bothered to notice. If you made it to the end, comment where you're watching from, and tell me the bravest thing you've ever seen someone do when it really counted.